a silent, invisible force governing not just the movement of the stars and the tides, but the very rhythm of your own thoughts, your anxieties, your deepest fears. A hidden pattern that determines every chaotic event, every moment of uncertainty, every breath you take while feeling lost and disconnected. You feel it because it's real. Most people walk through life trapped in this chaos, vibrating in a dense frequency charged with fear and anxiety, completely unaware of the invisible chains that hold them down. But then, there are the others, those people who seem to carry a silent, magnetic power, the ones who change the energy of a room just by entering it, who inspire, heal, and illuminate without any apparent effort. What if I told you they weren't just born lucky? What if I told you they have access to a hidden manual of the soul, a secret code of existence known by the great master Carl Jung himself, a pattern of choices, attitudes, and habits so powerful it can completely remold your frequency from chaos to clarity, from fear to power. In this video, I will reveal these secrets. These are not just tips. This is a profound realignment of mind, body, and spirit. But before we unlock this, I need to ask for your help. A huge percentage of the people who find life-changing clarity in these videos haven't yet subscribed to the channel. If this message is already resonating deep within you, take 1 second to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Don't let an algorithm decide when you get to receive the keys to your own transformation. And while you're there, press the like button to signal that this is the kind of powerful knowledge you want more of. And one more thing, so we can see just how far this awakening is spreading. Comment below with the city or country you are watching from. Let's create a global map to see how far the profound teachings of Carl Jung are helping to heal the world. Now, take a deep breath. Let go of everything you think you know. Prepare yourself, because what I'm about to show you is not a cold list of habits. It is an invitation to look within and awaken the powerful, aligned, and truly vibrant being that has always been waiting to be unleashed. The first sign that almost all high-vibration people carry is simple, but revolutionary. They do not give their presence to the world before aligning internally. While most people wake up and immediately throw themselves into the unrestrained flow of notifications, messages, worries, and commitments, these people make a different choice. Before opening their eyes to the world, they open their eyes to themselves. Before giving attention to others, they turn inward. It's as if they instinctively understand that the internal state they carry will determine the quality of everything that comes after. It is not about a complicated ritual or a luxury reserved for those who have plenty of time. It is a commitment, a silent pact with one's own soul. Sometimes it's a deeper breath before getting out of bed. At other times, it's a moment of meditation, a brief visualization, or just a moment of silence looking at the ceiling, feeling one's own body. The big difference is in the intention. Those who vibrate high know that they cannot go around pouring themselves into the world without first filling themselves up. They know that to sustain a true presence, it is necessary to first inhabit their own center. In that intimate space of recollection, something essential begins to reorganize. The mind slows down, the breath becomes a bridge between the internal and the external, and the body, often forgotten, is listened to again. And when we talk about meditation, we are not talking about the stereotype of sitting in a lotus position for hours in a perfect setting. We are talking about stopping, about listening to one's own field, about clearing the accumulated noise in the more superficial layers of the mind. Visualizing here is not about controlling the future. It is about allowing symbolic images to emerge from the unconscious like compasses. They arise bringing direction, clarity, guidance. The practice is so intimate that it fits in any space, in the car, while you wait for the traffic light to turn green, in the bathroom, during a shower, in the interval between one task and another. What matters is not the time dedicated, but the quality of the presence during that small encounter with yourself. Whoever lives this frequency perceives. Over time, that emotional reactions change. The need to respond to everything immediately gives way to more attentive listening. Chaotic environments no longer hijack one's energy so easily. There is a clearer perception of when something is misaligned, and along with that perception comes the knowledge of how to return. The mind by itself is scattered, but when the body, intention and presence meet in the same instant, something profound realigns. And from that point on, the life that seemed out of control suddenly begins to walk in the same rhythm as one's own vibration. What seemed difficult to control ceases to be a burden, because it is no longer about controlling, it is about flowing with awareness, about creating, moment by moment, an internal state capable of sustaining what truly matters. And now, perhaps it is time to ask yourself a question that can change the course of your morning, your afternoon, or your night. Have you already given yourself that moment of return to yourself today? If you haven't given yourself that moment yet, maybe now is a good time to take a deep breath, feel the air coming in, filling the body, and perceive that even in the midst of the rush, there is a space that is only yours, where external life cannot touch. It is in that silent interval where the truth begins to reveal itself, because before any step in the world, it is necessary to be whole inside, and that awareness is not restricted only to the beginning of the day. It expands to other areas of life. And that is exactly why the second habit of these people who vibrate differently is the search for solitude, but not that forced solitude, nor the withdrawal motivated by resentment or wounds. It is a mature solitude, chosen with intention, a space where the noise of the world cannot drown out the inner voice. They understand that to truly listen to what is happening inside, it is necessary to create silence around. It is not a whim. It is not an escape. It is a psychic need. Because living with others requires a constant giving of energy. And to give genuinely, it is necessary to first recharge. These people disappear for a few hours, sometimes for days. They retreat, close the door, silence their cell phone. Not because they are angry, but because they know that their own presence needs space to breathe. In solitude, emotions find a place to reorganize. Intuition, previously drowned by daily obligations, flows again with clarity. Thoughts slow down. The answers that seemed distant begin to emerge from within without effort. The truth is that contact with one's own center does not happen in the midst of applause or in the rush of social interactions. It happens in silence, in the pause, in the absence of stimuli. Jung understood this movement as a process of individuation, a return to the self, an internal journey that requires courage, because by moving away from external noise, we inevitably encounter the voices we were avoiding to hear. And perhaps that is precisely why so many people are afraid of solitude, because it is in solitude that the mask falls, where the difficult questions appear, where the stored feelings come to the surface. But whoever has already walked that path knows. That is where the healing begins. Within that intimate space, the body relaxes, the mind slows down, and what seemed confusing starts to make sense. Tears sometimes come, solitary laughter too, and both are welcome because they are part of the necessary cleansing for the energy to circulate again. After going through this phase of recollection, these people return to the world different, more whole, lighter, more centered, and those who live with them feel the difference, not because they say anything, but because the field around them transforms. Their gaze becomes more present, their words more certain, their touch more welcoming, their energy more stable. But the process does not end there, because the next habit is as fundamental as this one, caring for the body. Not that superficial care focused only on aesthetics or social expectations, but a deep care that understands the body as the first territory where the soul dwells. Whoever lives in that high frequency knows that ignoring physical signs is the same as silencing one's own internal truth, because every pain, every tension, every discomfort carries a story, a message, a note from the soul that often expresses itself first through matter. These people do not wait or collapse to take care of themselves. They feel when something is misaligned. They know how to recognize fatigue before it turns into exhaustion. They perceive the first signs of imbalance, a sleep that is no longer so restorative, a breath that shortens, a weight on the back that wasn't there yesterday. And instead of ignoring, They listen. They adjust their diet, respect the body's limits, prioritize rest, not out of fear of getting sick, but out of respect for their own temple. They understand that energy needs a healthy support to flow fully. Daily movement ceases to be an aesthetic obligation and becomes a ritual of energy release. Be it a walk at the end of the afternoon, a stretch before sleeping, or even a spontaneous dance in the living room. The important thing is to allow the body to express itself so that the flow of energy does not remain stagnant. Jung said that physical symptoms are often the language of the unconscious trying to manifest itself, a call to look within. And that is why these people do not fight with the symptoms. They translate them. They seek to understand what is behind each discomfort, each pain. Even bathing, for them, ceases to be a mechanical act and becomes a moment of energetic cleansing. Every drop of water is transformed into a vehicle of renewal. Every deep breath becomes an invitation to release what no longer serves. The more tuned the body, the clearer the intuition, the lighter the presence, the more coherent the energetic field that surrounds them. And now, as you listen to all this, you may be asking yourself, how long has it been since you truly listened to the signals of your own body? How long has it been since you allowed yourself to rest, to nourish yourself, to care for yourself, not out of obligation, but out of love for yourself? It's curious to note how we often treat our own body like a machine that can be pushed beyond its limits, ignoring the signs, postponing care, pretending that everything is fine, until suddenly it screams. A fatigue that does not go away, a persistent insomnia, an inexplicable pain, a discomfort that has no name but has weight. And then we are forced to stop, to look, to listen. But those who are already on the path of high vibration do not wait to reach that point. These people develop an intimacy with their own body that goes beyond biology. They know that every physical sensation carries an emotional story, an energetic reflection, and that is why they take care of themselves with the same attention that would be given to a delicate garden. They water, prune, feed, and mainly they respect the time to bloom and the time to retreat. And it is within this deep listening that the fourth habit that they all share is born, the habit of written self-reflection, a ritual so simple and at the same time so powerful. For these people, writing is not just recording the day, it is opening a space for dialogue with their own unconscious, a courageous dive into the murky waters of their own psyche. There is no fixed script or aesthetic to follow. Grammar, vocabulary, or the beauty of the sentences do not matter. What matters is honesty. It is the act of putting on paper what the mind often tries to hide. Because when thoughts take written form, they cease to be loose ghosts and become known faces, named, recognized, integrated. On each page, fears are brought to light. Previously hidden desires gain a voice. Patterns of behavior begin to reveal themselves. The mind, which previously spun in circles of anxiety, finds a thread of clarity. A sentence written on impulse can be the trigger for a healing process that has been dormant for years. And the most beautiful thing is that this practice requires nothing beyond presence. It can happen in the morning before the world wakes up. It can happen at night as a ritual to close the day. It can arise in the middle of a hectic afternoon when the heart tightens and the breath fails. The notebook is there, always available, always silent, always ready to welcome. Carl Jung spoke of active imagination as a portal of communication between the internal and external worlds. And that is exactly what happens when someone surrenders to reflective writing. A dialogue begins, not with the world out there, but with the world here, inside. Over time, the pages become witnesses to an ongoing process of individuation. Each written text is a layer of shadow integrated, a new perspective, conquered, a truth faced without masks. It is no coincidence that after writing, the vibration changes, the body relaxes, the breath expands, the energy begins to circulate with lightness. And when the day dawns again, that person moves on to the fifth habit, the conscious selection of everything they consume. Not just what they eat or drink, but what they read, listen to, watch, and allow into their energetic field. While many endlessly scroll through their timeline, getting lost in empty, content, these people exercise an intimate, almost ritualistic curatorship over the stimuli they absorb, because they have already understood that every word heard, every image seen, every conversation that remains resonating, all of it leaves marks. All of it becomes material with which the unconscious will work during dreams, during choices, during moments of decision. They choose with more intention the books they read, the movies they watch, the conversations they participate in. Not because they are elitist, but because they know how easily the field gets contaminated. A piece of bad news, poorly digested, can alter the mood of an entire day. A video full of negativity can lower the frequency for hours, and they are no longer willing to pay that price. This does not mean they live in a bubble. On the contrary, they are aware of the world, of the collective pains, of the social urgencies, but they choose how they expose themselves to it. They know when it is time to be informed and when it is necessary to preserve themselves. They perceive when the content nourishes and when it only numbs. And if at the end of a day they feel their field is heavy, they do what is necessary to cleanse it. A song that elevates, a longer bath, a moment of silence, a text that inspires. Everything is chosen with intention because they know that the unconscious sees everything and that in the end, what is fed is what flourishes. Jung said that the symbol is the language of the soul, and therefore everything that passes through our sight, hearing, and mind becomes, in some way, a symbol. A movie can become a trigger. A phrase can become a belief. A comment can become a fear. That is why they guard the entrance, knowing that it is the only way to keep the field clean enough to continue vibrating coherently. And now, as you listen to all this, stop and reflect on what you have allowed into your field lately. What kind of energy are you absorbing, even without realizing it? Perhaps this is one of the most important questions you can ask yourself today, because in a world saturated with stimuli, the quality of what we allow in becomes the main filter of our vibration. And it is precisely along this line that the sixth habit of these people of high presence manifests. They hold silence as a conscious choice, almost like a declaration of who they are. While most feel the need to fill every space with words, noise, or distractions, these people understand the power that exists in the interval between one word and another, between one thought and another. For them, silence is not absence. It is content. It is strength. It is a presence that speaks without saying a word. There is something profoundly magnetic about someone who knows how to hold silence completely. They are not in a hurry to answer. They do not steamroll conversations with anxiety. They do not interrupt impulsively. They listen, and they listen in a way that the other person feels it, because there is a genuine surrender to listening. The gaze remains, the breath stays steady, the whole body seems to say, I am here, present. This silence is so full that often the mere presence of these people in a room is enough to reorganize the energy around. In places where chaos reigns, they arrive, and without uttering a single word, something begins to slow down. Restless people breathe a little deeper. Conversations lower their tone. Even the most skeptical perceive that there is something different there. And it is not a rational choice. It is not a strategy. It is a state of someone who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone, of someone who has already made peace with their own internal space, and therefore does not feel obliged to fill it with unnecessary sounds. Of course, this silence can also be uncomfortable for many, because when the noise ceases, what was hidden emerges, and not everyone is ready to face what their own silence brings to the surface. Therefore, being near these people can be profoundly transformative or profoundly challenging. Carl Jung spoke about unconscious attitudes, those that we emit without realizing it, but that others pick up with precision. And that is exactly what happens with these people. Their field speaks even before the word arrives. The body communicates, the gaze transmits, the posture reveals. And most fascinatingly, this silence is not rigid, it is not imposing, it is welcoming. It doesn't push away, it brings closer. It doesn't create distance, but depth. Whoever is near feels the invitation. Here, it is safe to be who you are, even if that means just being silent. And after this silent immersion, we arrive at the seventh habit that these people cultivate, the conscious care of their own energy. But don't expect a list of extravagant techniques here, or an endless sequence of rituals for social media. What happens is much simpler, and, for that very reason, more true. For these people, taking care of their energy is not a trend, it is a basic necessity. They perceive when their field begins to feel heavy. They feel when the environment is draining. They recognize immediately when a conversation exceeds a healthy limit. And instead of ignoring these signals, they act. Sometimes it's a bath with herbs before bed. Other times it's incense lit with a real intention of cleansing, and not just out of habit. A crystal placed in the right spot, an essential oil applied with presence, a music that transforms the atmosphere of the room, a barefoot walk on the earth to discharge. There is no rigidity. There is listening. There is perception. What works today may not work tomorrow. What is useful for one moment may not be useful for another. They do not bind themselves to manuals. They follow their own field. They ask inwardly, what do I need now to realign myself? And when the answer comes, whatever it may be, they welcome it because they have already understood that taking care of one's energy is not a whim or an exaggeration. It is emotional survival. It is vibrational support. Jung spoke of the importance of symbols, and that is exactly what these practices are. Living material symbols that anchor the invisible in the concrete. A bath ceases to be just a bath. It becomes a rebirth. A ray of sunlight on the skin ceases to be just heat. It becomes a recharge. A touch of essential oil on the neck ceases to be perfume. It becomes protection. And so, these people navigate through the days. With an internal radar always on, they adjust, reorganize, recalibrate, not out of paranoia, but out of intimacy with their own field. And now, answer me honestly. When was the last time you took care of your energy with that intention? When was the last time you stopped and asked, how is my field today? Perhaps that question sounds strange if you have never given yourself that space before. Perhaps the idea of having an energetic field still seems abstract or even a bit distant from your reality. But the truth is, whether you want it or not, that field exists and reacts to everything, to every thought, to every emotion, to every environment you step into. And that is why the eighth habit of these people, so aligned with their own truth, is so necessary. They are always reinventing themselves, seeking to become more conscious versions of themselves. This search is not driven by anxiety. It is not a desperate race in search of a perfect version of oneself. On the contrary, there is a restless serenity, a genuine desire to deepen, to recognize one's own flaws, to welcome one's own shadows. There is no longer room to live on the surface. These people know that self-knowledge is not a destination, but a cycle that repeats in ever deeper layers. They have already understood that even after much evolution, they will still stumble upon old patterns from time to time. But now, when that happens, the response is different. Instead of going into denial, they take a deep breath, observe what is happening, and adjust their course. They know that the ego is cunning, that the ego will try from time to time to regain control, to create illusions of superiority, to make excuses for old behaviors. But whoever has dedicated themselves to looking within for long enough has developed a kind of internal radar for these subtle movements. A radar that goes off whenever incoherence tries to settle in. Jung said that the process of individuation is a journey of integration. It is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole, about looking with honesty at everything one is. Light and shadow, strength and fragility, courage and fear. And these people have understood this viscerally. That is why they are not ashamed to start over as many times as necessary. They know how to apologize. They know how to admit when they are wrong. They know how to change course. The most curious thing is that this constant search for inner truth generates a type of magnetism that is difficult to explain. The people around them perceive it. They feel that there is something different there. It is not about being enlightened. It is about being honest, transparent, real. And this transparency has a contagious effect. It inspires without needing speeches. It teaches without needing to impose. And here arises the ninth habit, the ability to create boundaries with a presence so firm that it dispenses with justifications. These people do not need to raise their voice to be understood. They do not need to harden their body or assume an aggressive posture to mark their territory. The boundary they establish comes from a place so deep, so legitimate, that the other person perceives it even before hearing the word no. When something or someone threatens the peace they have cultivated with so much effort, the response is clear, quick, and serene. There is no drama, no need to over-explain. The energy speaks for them. The body remains stable. The gaze is direct, but not hostile. There is an authority there that is born from integrity and not from fear. These people learned, often painfully, that yielding too much is the shortest path to their own depletion. They have already experienced the exhaustion of trying to please everyone, of saying yes when their body was screaming no. And now, after many falls and reconstructions, they have chosen to protect their own internal space as one protects a sacred territory. Jung spoke about the repressed shadow which, when ignored, ends up being projected onto others. And that is exactly what these people have learned to avoid. They recognize the discomfort before it overflows. They perceive the first signs of emotional overload. And before anger has to speak for them, they take a stand. They have learned that cutting off is a reaction, while setting a boundary is presence. That imposing a limit does not need to be an act of violence, but of self-love. That saying no can be as welcoming as a yes when it is said with truth. And most interestingly, when the environment no longer welcomes them, they know when it is time to leave. They do so with dignity, without dramatization, without needing the other to understand or validate, because at the end of the day, they have already understood that inner peace is too costly to be negotiated. And now, at this very moment, you might be remembering a situation where you needed a boundary but hesitated. Perhaps you are realizing how many times you allowed your space to be trespassed just to avoid conflict. If that is the case, know that it's okay, because recognizing it is the first step to changing. And you are here listening to all of this precisely because some part of you is already ready for that change. And when the boundary is set, something curious happens. The energetic field of these people strengthens even more, because by saying no to what drains them, they are automatically saying yes to themselves, a yes to their own emotional health, to their own clarity, to their own truth. And it is in this clean, newly protected space that the 10th habit begins to flourish, the ability to transform pain into symbolic service. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful and at the same time, most challenging characteristics of those who reach a higher vibration. These people do not deny pain. They do not hide it under the rug, nor do they paint it with false colors to always seem fine. They look it in the face. They sit with the discomfort. They allow themselves to feel everything that needs to be felt. They know that pain is a harsh but absolutely necessary teacher. They know that it is within the ruptures that the greatest learnings are born, that the dark nights of the soul are portals, not sentences. Instead of romanticizing suffering or sinking into self-pity, they choose another path, that of giving form to what hurt, of transforming what was once a fall into a bridge for others. Sometimes this transmutation becomes an art, other times a conversation, a look, a silence that welcomes without the need for words. These people have lost their footing a few times. They know what it's like to feel that everything has collapsed. They have experienced the bitter taste of not knowing where to start over. But they also know what it is to traverse that emptiness and, on the other side, discover a denser, more whole, more compassionate presence. Jung said that enlightenment does not come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. And these people have done it not in a theoretical way, but in a lived way, experienced in the flesh, in the tears, in the sleepless nights, in the long silences, where the only company was their own inner echo. And perhaps that is why today, when someone approaches them bringing their own pain, the reaction is not one of judgment or flight, but of listening, of acceptance from someone who has already been there, from someone who knows that the other needs space to feel more than ready-made advice. This symbolic service can appear in many forms, in a text that touches the other in a deep place, in a friendship that heals without needing to talk about healing, in a simple presence that sustains the environment when everyone around is about to collapse. They do not position themselves as examples of overcoming. They do not give empty, self-help motivational speeches. They simply live, and by living with that intensity of presence, they end up serving as a beacon for those who are still going through the storm. And it is precisely this transformation of pain into presence that prepares these people for the next habit, the development of a fine-tuned intuition, a type of subtle, almost imperceptible, but profoundly real perception. The body feels before the mind understands. The gaze captures what words hide. The air of an environment reveals more than rehearsed smiles. These people enter a place and in a matter of seconds they know what is happening there. Not because someone told them, but because the field informs them. Jung described intuition as one of the main functions of consciousness, an ability to perceive possibilities, hidden truths, and deep connections, without the need for a logical explanation. And this is exactly how these people operate. They perceive before they know. They feel when the environment is heavy, when someone is lying to themselves, when there is hidden tension beneath a light conversation. They recognize the gestures, the averted gazes, the tone of voice that reveals more than the content of the words says. At first, this sensitivity is frightening. Many of these people have already doubted their own perception, have blamed themselves for exaggerating, have tried to convince themselves they were being dramatic. But over time, and after many episodes in which ignoring their intuition cost them dearly, they learned to trust this internal radar. Today, they listen to that call without hesitation. If they feel a sudden discomfort, they respect it. If they perceive an inexplicable fatigue next to someone, they move away. If something inside them says it's time to change direction, they obey. Even when the mind asks for logic, even when others do not understand because they know, the soul warns beforehand, always. And whoever has learned to listen to that warning has an immense advantage in life. And now, you may be starting to remember all the times your intuition tried to alert you, but you preferred to ignore it. And that's okay, because the most important thing is to realize that from now on, you can do it differently. And it is exactly this awareness, this inner listening that becomes more refined with each choice, that leads to the 12th habit of these people who vibrate so differently. They speak with soul, even in the smallest gestures. It's not about what they say, but how they say it. It's not just the choice of words, but the vibrational weight that each word carries. They are not concerned with impressing with long speeches or with a sophisticated vocabulary. On the contrary, sometimes a simple phrase said at the right moment with the right intention is capable of touching the other in such a deep place that the impact lasts for days. It could be an "everything is okay." It could be an "I understand you." It could be just a gaze held a few seconds longer than usual. What happens is that these people live with internal coherence. What they think, what they feel, and what they express walk together. There isn't that disconnect that is so common in those who live on autopilot, saying what they think they should say, but feeling something completely opposite inside. This coherence gives their words a symbolic weight that is almost invisible, but absolutely real. They know the value of a compliment, the power of a silence, the healing that can exist in an unhurried hug. They are not performative. They do not make spirituality spectacle. They simply are. The most beautiful thing is that those who live with them feel this density, even if they cannot explain it. These are the people that when they speak, you stop to listen. That when they look at you, you feel that you were truly seen. That when they touch you, even if briefly, they leave a feeling of welcome in the air. Jung said that the persona, that social mask we all use to adapt to the world, can become a channel of authentic expression when there is internal integration. And that is what happens here. These people are no longer hiding behind characters. They have stopped playing roles and have started to live their own truth. And that truth overflows. It is in the way they greet someone, in the tone of voice used in a difficult conversation, in the calmness with which they explain something, in the delicacy with which they apologize. Even their laughter carries intention. It is not that empty, automatic laughter made just to fill the silence. It is a laughter that comes from deep within, that fills the environment with a light but meaningful vibration. And most impressively, they manage to make time slow down around them. A conversation with them is not rushed. Even when they have little time, the quality of their presence is so intense that the other person feels they were prioritized, that that moment was real. And as if all this were not enough, there is still a 13th habit, perhaps the most subtle, but also the most decisive. These people trust in the soul's timing. In a world where everyone is running, where everything is for yesterday, where productivity is idolized and silence is seen as a waste of time, they choose a different rhythm. They do not let themselves be dragged by imposed calendars or by social pressures that demand immediate results. They know from their own experience that some answers only arrive after long periods of internal gestation, that some decisions need to mature in silence, that there are pains that only heal with time, that there are cycles that need to close naturally without forcing, without anticipating. They have already experienced the price of accelerating what needed to mature. They have already seen the damage of making hasty decisions just to meet external expectations. They have already experienced the frustration of harvesting too early and finding unripe fruits. That is why today they trust. It is not a blind trust. It is not conformism. It is a conscious surrender to their own internal process. They act when it is time to act. They retreat when it is time to retreat. They know how to recognize the signs that something is still germinating, and they respect it. Jung described the unconscious as a living, pulsating field that operates on its own time, governed by symbols, images, and movements that linear logic cannot control. And it is within this understanding that these people have learned to live. They know that true transformation does not happen on the surface. It happens in silence, in layers, in the soul's timing. Therefore, when they need to wait, they wait fully, not with anxiety, but with faith. A faith built not on theories, but on experiences. They know that there have been other waits before, that they have gone through other winters, and that always after the wait came the blossoming. This relationship with time changes everything. These people put less pressure on others, demand less of themselves, breathe more deeply before, reacting welcome pauses as an essential part of the process. And when the world says hurry, they, with an almost provocative calm, choose to follow their own rhythm. If you are still here, listening to my voice, it is not by chance. It is because a profound shift has already begun within you. That feeling of relief, of recognition, that is your soul confirming that you are on the right path, finally hearing the language it has always spoken. The process unfolding inside you is real, and it is following the exact rhythm you need to awaken. You did not reach the end of this journey by accident. You were called here. Recognizing even one of these habits within yourself is the undeniable proof that you are no longer asleep. It doesn't matter if this is your first step or if you are deep on the path. What matters is that your soul has answered. And now, I must ask you to seal this transformation. It's a shocking fact that a vast number of souls who complete this journey with us have not yet subscribed. If this work has truly touched you, do not leave your future growth to chance. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell right now. Make a conscious choice to stay connected to this powerful current of awakening so you don't miss the deeper layers we have yet to uncover. And press the like button as an energetic signal to the universe that you are choosing this path of high vibration. Finally, to anchor this new frequency into your reality, I want you to leave a final, powerful declaration in the comments. A word that, as the great Carl Jung taught, integrates the light and the shadow into a powerful, unified force. That word is wholeness. Do not just write it, claim it. I want you to write in the comments below, I claim my wholeness. Let this be your energetic signature, a message to yourself and a beacon to others who are also on this path. Reading those words in the comments will create an undeniable, invisible network of real, authentic transformation. I want to thank you, not just for watching, but for the courage it took to truly listen. The journey of presence Truth and high vibration is not a simple one, but it is the only one that is real. And by being here now, you have already begun. Take care of your field, honor your story, and embrace the wholest you have just claimed. There is so much more to uncover. We will meet again on the next step of the journey.